Okay, so I was just saying that Excel is actually a fairly useful tool for doing some of this work. It's not the best because we've tried to show you, in most of our examples, we'll show you this other kind of way of drawing what we often call the crow's foot, right? When you indicate the many side of a one-to-many relationship. And the drawing tool doesn't include that. You could actually manually do it all, with little lines, but that's just too time-consuming for me. So I'll accept it if you use Excel if it just has an arrowhead on the end to indicate the many side. That's okay. Now, as I said, I cheated and copied and pasted this right out of the PowerPoint. But it's pretty easy. Under the insert menu here, you can throw in a text box, right? Where's text box? Help me see it here. To the left? Right. Text box. There we go. Right? They move everything around. So you can just stick a text box into Excel, and you can, put it centered and employee, oh, sorry, all caps, Dad David, right? And, EMP number and so on. So you can obviously do the same kind of thing here. I just copied it so I wasn't being lazy. All right. Well, because I am lazy. There you go. I confess that it's true. Okay, so in terms of a table design chart, though, this is something that I asked you to think about for today. So how we normally do these, we put the name, right, up top, and then we'll have field. Can I, there. I don't know if that's better or not. Let me move that over closer. Well, I guess. Right, so those are our columns. I'll just maybe throw a little underline under there. Obviously, that needs to be a little wider and so on. So with that as a table design chart, then, obviously the first thing you do is list all the fields. Now, we're going to use this convention. It helps a lot, especially when you're first learning, because we can easily see which attributes kind of belong to which entity. And when we start working with multiple ones, right, and then sometimes we join them together in a query, and it makes it easy right away to see that when I say emp first, well, that's the employee first name, as opposed to maybe there's a first name in a customer table, right, and it was the cust or something like that first. So, the prefixes kind of help for now. So in the end, you might get away from using them after you've been doing this long enough, but it's not a bad practice. And you see the idea. Okay. Oh, I just used the little underline tool up here. I guess actually the little box tool, I can even do a thick border around all of it. That probably looks more like what our slides have. Anyway. Now, because we decided that we would have the employee number as all by itself, a standalone field is the primary key, I should go like that. Okay, so does anybody have any thoughts on data types here? Help me out now. So that employee number, let's look once again at our case here. I have to go back to week 1, do I? Should have left this one open. Okay, so looking at this, we can see the data here, right? So the employee IDs, any suggestions on the data type? That's a very good suggestion, and I can't argue with it, right? You might say, well, they kind of look like numbers. Couldn't we just use an integer or something? And I'd like to, at this point, emphasize this. There's often not an absolute right or wrong answer. This is more an art than a science, really, database modeling. Sometimes you'll find after a while that certain choices might get you in trouble down the road. But at this stage, choosing char 3, because they're all consistently set out that way, based on the information we've been given, it's a very good choice to make. If you want to say, well, I could just do that as an integer, obviously you could as well, right? So it's not right or wrong, but we'll stick with the suggested char3 um, because they're always being shown here in 3 characters, not 2, not 4. Then we can confidently go ahead with the design that will always stick with that fixed length string. So whether you want to go nchar or char, most of the examples we have still use char. They don't use the Unicode character set. I talked about that on Monday. Unicode is used to store all the different international character sets out there. There's no right or wrong for that as far as I'm concerned. So char 3 is certainly big enough. And the constraint here obviously is that it's the primary key. No problem. Oh, good question then. The primary key is basically the unique identifier. When we think of it in the modeling terms, we talk about the entity needs a unique identifier, one or more attributes that identify a single instance of the entity. So in the table, we define that as the primary key. It's a key because it's a key piece of information, I guess, and it's the primary key because it's how we tell one record or one row from another. It's just the employee number will be the primary key. Yeah. Okay. So the employee's first name, well, let's look at our data again. Any thoughts? Our first name's all the same length? Obviously not, right? So the first name, the last name, we're going to want to use that variable varchar approach, right? And there's not a right or wrong answer. Particularly, I mean, if you made it too small, that would obviously be wrong. But you don't want to go too big either. So, 30, 50, something like that. Those are pretty common numbers people start with. If you're assuming a shorter name, 30 characters is probably enough. Or you just go with 50 for both. When you start using the automated tools to help you, the default is usually actually 50 characters. Question? Yes. That's right. But I've had some students come through here, especially last names. They don't fit in Blackboard. Like there's too many characters in the name, so it's extremely rare, right? So yeah, you wouldn't want to go at 8,000 or anything like that. That's way too much. But it's not hard, not bad to leave a little bit of extra room. These days, hard drive space is just about the cheapest thing in terms of computer hardware. So it used to be that, they worried about every single byte to make it as compact as possible. Not so much now. Okay. Yes, question. Excellent. I like you bringing up that question. For everyone's sake and for the video, um, question was, what if you get more than 1,000 employees if you're only allowing 3 characters? Well, that's an obviously problem you're going to get into. So that's an excellent example of the kind of question you would ask your client. So you might say, well, I want to allow 4. They might say, well, we're probably never going to have more than about 20 or 30 employees. And we're just using this number system because that's what the first person thought of, and we're kind of stuck with it now. So there's lots of room between 222 and 555, so I probably won't really run out of room. But good that you thought of that. Excellent question. It's one reason why you probably would want to go with an actual integer or something like that, because then there's over 2 million. Probably not too many companies have more than 2 million employees around. Okay, good. All right, so we'll just go with like a varchar. I don't know. If you want to just stick with that default of 50, I would not mark that wrong. And guess what? We have first, last, and the job title. What if that happens if I do this? There we go. Now, salary. You all watched that little video on deciding what data types to use. What do you suggest for the salary? Money? You're going to go against everything he said in the video, are you? Ah. Well, you know what? there are really a couple of main choices. One of the money types or a decimal type. And in the video, he makes a strong case for the main problem with using money is it keeps 4 decimal places. And that actually can sometimes be good for accuracy, but it's often a bit of a pain because you have formatting issues sometimes with getting the number to look just right. I personally don't buy his arguments. I mean, he goes into it much more than that. But I don't personally buy it all that much. I'm perfectly fine doing what he suggests, and that's what other teachers are doing, so I'll follow that. I would have no problem, and I will give you full marks if you just say money or small money even, right, in this case. But I'm going to follow the other examples that we have, and I'm going to go with decimal. And then with decimal, we have 2 parameters we pass, the overall number of decimal places that this one will hold, right? So I'll often use 9, even if I probably won't have that quite that many digits in front. And a comma 2 gives me my pennies, right, down to those decimal places. And that should probably do the job. So if you did use money, I won't take marks off, but this is the most commonly used answer. Okay, the start date. Now, what about dates and times? What did you learn from the video? Yes? Yeah. So you have room for 7 in front of the decimal place and 2 behind it. Okay, good question about 9-2. Okay, the start date, when the date the employee started. What did you learn from the video? Am I making an assumption here? You can be honest. Nobody watched the video, right? Okay, fair enough. You should really watch them. They really help. They're not as good as my videos, I know, but still, that's why we have them up there. He covers a lot of good stuff in there. Just to quickly summarize about dates and date time, right? That's often the issue. In the old days, all we had, and in fact, in languages like C#, for the most part, what you have is a date time, where a single variable holds all of the year, month, day information as well as hour, minutes, seconds, and even down to fractions of a second, nanoseconds, and so on. And it's all one big data type holds the whole thing. And traditionally, what we used to do is you would take that date time and you would only decide, well, in my case, I'm just going to show or worry about the date portion. But when you created it, it always just assumed midnight then for the time portion. Or you could use the same thing to track time, and it would just use a default date, right? Which, depending on the system, would be different values. But it might be actually probably like 1840 something, January the 1st. But you'd never worry about it or see it. It would just use the time portion. Or you could combine the whole thing and use it all at once. Fortunately, starting a few versions back, SQL Server now supports, in addition to date time, it supports separate date and time. So if you're never going to worry about what time of the day the actual employee was hired, which is kind of ridiculous, then we can simply use date. Okay, and that's all there is to that. Okay, so that would give me a reasonable table design chart. Now, another thing that's useful in Excel, once you do this, is to actually map the data into a table without even going to the database yet. Before you actually start dirtying your hands with create table statements, which you might end up having to redo anyway, it's a way to sort of cross-check and kind of make sure that things look like it's going correctly, especially when you have multiple entities. This really helps. So when I say map the data, what I'm talking about is come down here, and once again, I'll say employee, and then I'll basically, is there a way to quickly paste the vertical cells into a horizontal arrangement? Anybody know? Excel can do anything if you know how to use it. I just forget because I don't use it often enough. Let me copy. I wonder if there's a paste special that gives me the chance to transpose. Ooh, look at this. Ha ha ha! I didn't even know I thought I would be able to do that. Okay. All right. I learned something new too. But I just right clicked and in paste special I selected transpose. So that gives me all of my columns By the way, this little dots animated around there go away once you hit escape, by the way. All right. Now it gives me them as column headings.